I don't know about you, but it seems like every year time just moves a little bit faster. It's like a cruel joke. You finally get used to writing the correct year on things, and then suddenly another one has passed and you're messing it up again. I am personally the worst for this. Anyway, since 2023 is almost officially behind us, we decided what better way to honor this strange and bittersweet feeling than by looking back at some of the equally bizarre stories we covered this year. Today, we're going to be focusing on stories from our Crimes of the Week series. But if you like this video, be sure to look out for another compilation at the end of this week, covering ones from the international edition of our show as well. Just a heads up, because this is a compilation-style video, keep in mind that these segments have not been edited since they first appeared on their respective lists, so references to specific days of the week as well as other small details may no longer apply. Also, we just wanted to give a quick thanks to every single one of you out there for tuning in. You've all helped to make 2023 another unforgettable year, and we're eternally grateful for all the support you've sent our way in all its forms. Have a safe and happy new year, and here's to an even better 2024.
Authorities in Scott County, Indiana say that a 34-year-old woman is facing numerous charges this week following a bizarre incident in which she allegedly kidnapped a child and then ran naked down the street while trying to evade police. According to reports, the incident began sometime on January 2nd when police in the city of Austin were flagged down by the husband of 34-year-old Brittany Hurt. The man said that he was at home when all of a sudden his wife arrived at their residence with an 8-year-old child that wasn't theirs. After handing the child off to her husband, Hurt had allegedly taken off her clothes, grabbed 2 white trash bags, and proceeded to run down the street. When police caught up with Hurt, they reportedly found her just as her husband had described. She was uncooperative and apparently attempted to attack officers before finally being handcuffed. Even after being placed in the back of a patrol car, though, Hurt reportedly continued to try and get away. She allegedly kicked at the vehicle's back windows and also refused to put on clothes that her husband had brought for her. While being taken in for examination, Hurt reportedly started to make strange and unsettling comments. She kept talking about how all of the children were being taught by computers and saying that all the children needed to die. When police spoke to witnesses, they learned that Hurt had abducted the 8-year-old girl that she left with her husband from the playground of a local Austin elementary school. Surveillance footage showed that she had climbed the fence of the school and approached the victim before leading her back to the fence and hoisting her over. According to police, this was actually the second child she attempted to kidnap that day. A short time earlier, Hurt had allegedly approached another girl, grabbed her wrist, and said, quote, "Let's start a family." The child reportedly managed to break free of Hurt's grip and ran away. At the time of this recording, Hurt is facing multiple charges, including kidnapping, battery to a public safety official, criminal trespass, resisting law enforcement, public nudity, and public indecency. Officials at the school where the incident happened say that they are now reassessing their playground protocols and plan to increase security and safety for their students.
Authorities in Gilmer County, Georgia say that an unlucky 39-year-old suspect is in custody this week after he found himself outgunned by several bystanders at the scene of an attempted robbery. The incident took place at around 6:30 p.m. on January 9th, when 39-year-old Sean Sutton and his wife Melody arrived at an Ideal Mart gas station in the city of Ellijay. According to reports, Melody waited in the car while Sutton walked inside, at first pretending to be a customer about to purchase an energy drink. However, at some point the 39-year-old allegedly proceeded to take out a pair of women's underwear, pull them onto his head in an attempt to cover his face, and then remove a .45 caliber handgun from his pocket. He then went behind the gas station's counter, pointed the weapon at the store's clerk, and demanded money. Unfortunately for Sutton, what he didn't know was that he wasn't the only person who had a gun. It turned out that not one, not two, but 3 customers who were at the gas station were also armed, and when they realized what was going on, they quickly intervened. After some coordination, the trio reportedly managed to disarm Sutton, who was held until law enforcement could make it to the scene. Even after police arrived, though, Sutton was apparently uncooperative. He was finally taken into custody after allegedly being tasered by one of the responding officers. Sutton's wife Melody was also arrested at the scene, though she reportedly went quietly. At the time of this recording, both suspects have reportedly been charged with armed robbery. Sutton faces further charges of aggravated assault and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon.
Authorities in Fort Myers, Florida are requesting the public's help in the hopes of cracking quite the filthy criminal this week after an unknown man allegedly broke into a local restaurant and defecated on the floor. According to reports, the incident took place in the early morning hours of January 21st at Joe's Crab Shack. After breaking a small window, the suspect was able to gain access to the restaurant by crawling inside. He then helped himself to a variety of items, including alcohol and one of the restaurant's branded hats, which he wore on his head as he walked around. However, it's what the suspect did before leaving the business that has since caused the story to make headlines. In the middle of the restaurant's floor, the man pulled down his shorts and emptied his bowels, leading police to dub him, quote, the pooping perpetrator. Fort Myers police have now released several images of the so-called pooping perpetrator in the hopes that someone out there will recognize him. Anyone with information about the case is encouraged to reach out to Fort Myers police directly or to call Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers. Residents of Boone, North Carolina were treated to quite the bizarre sight this week when a man led police on a low-speed chase across town, leaving a trail of destruction behind him. According to reports, the incident began at around 9:25 a.m. on January 17th when Boone police received a call about a man driving a tractor around in a local parking lot and trying to hit pedestrians. When officers arrived, they found the situation as described, and soon learned that the tractor had been stolen as well. Upon seeing police responding to the scene, the driver fled in the tractor. A chase began that apparently lasted at least an hour, during which time speeds never reached much higher than 20 miles an hour. Despite the low speeds, police say the situation was still dangerous. Thankfully, no one was hit by the suspect, though he did allegedly ram several vehicles, as well as a dumpster and a church. When the chase was far away enough from people that police felt it was safe enough to intervene, they tried deploying stop sticks in front of the stolen vehicle. This proved ineffective, so police instead shot out one of the tractor's front tires. According to Police Chief Andy LeBeau, the suspects drove a few more miles with tire damage before turning down a private drive. It was at this point that he ran out of road and was finally forced to come to a stop. After jumping out, the suspect, later identified as Ronnie K. Hicks, pulled out a knife which he brandished in front of police. He was tasered and taken into custody without injury. LeBeau says that Hicks is, quote, very familiar with his department, but did not elaborate further. At the time of this recording, Hicks is facing numerous charges, including felonious fleeing to elude arrest, felonious assault with a deadly weapon on a government official, misdemeanor driving while impaired, resisting a public officer, and reckless driving. Representatives from a Catholic church in Fargo, North Dakota say that it's Jesus who needs saving this week after one of their statues of him was destroyed by a half-naked woman believed to be on drugs. According to reports, the whole thing started at around 6:30 p.m. on January 23rd when police were called to St. Mary's Cathedral near the corner of 7th Street and 6th Avenue. When officers arrived at the scene, they saw a woman, later identified as 35-year-old Brittany Reynolds, exiting the church and trying to run away across the street. She had no shirt, no bra, and no shoes on. After police caught up with Reynolds, she allegedly wasn't able to answer basic questions about where and who she was and what she was doing, leading officers to believe that she was under the influence of drugs. She was initially placed on a psychiatric hold, though was later put under arrest. Police were provided surveillance footage from St. Mary's Cathedral, which allegedly captured Reynolds' actions prior to police being called. After entering the church, the 35-year-old knocked over a potted plant before walking over to a large statue of Jesus and completely ripping it off the wall. Pieces of the statue reportedly broke off upon hitting the floor. Police and church officials say that they are unsure of the exact value of the item, but were able to find a similar statue listed online for $11,500. At the time of this recording, authorities say that Reynolds is currently being held in the Cass County Jail. She has been charged with felony criminal mischief.
In other chicken-related news, Authorities in Cook County, Illinois say that a 66-year-old school worker is facing charges this week after she was accused of embezzling more than $1 million from her district in the form of chicken wings. According to reports, the scheme was run by 66-year-old Vera Liddell, a food service director who worked for Harvey School District 152 for more than a decade. From July of 2020 to February of 2022, she is alleged to have ordered more than 11,000 cases of chicken wings, which were charged to the district and ordered from their food provider, but which were never provided to the students. Authorities say that the scheme began at the height of the pandemic, when students were not physically allowed in schools, but the district was continuing to provide meals that their families could pick up. It's unclear exactly what Liddell did with all those chicken wings, but it's alleged that they never even made it into school buildings. Instead, the 66-year-old reportedly ordered them separately from the district's other food items and picked them up herself in a district-owned cargo van. The whole scheme unraveled sometime early last year when a business manager for the school district did a routine mid-year audit and realized that they were $300,000 over their annual food budget despite only being halfway into the year. When the business manager contacted the district's food provider, apparently everyone was familiar with Liddell because of the massive amount of chicken wings she was ordering. The fraud is estimated to have been worth around $1.5 million. The whole thing is even more disheartening because Harvey School District 152 is by no means a wealthy district to begin with. According to reports, more than 80% of the district's 1,600 children come from low-income families. Liddell is now facing charges including felony continuing financial crimes enterprise and theft exceeding $1 million. Representatives from the Dallas Police Department say that a 24-year-old man is in custody this week after he allegedly stole 2 exotic monkeys and was accused of being behind a number of other bizarre and unsettling incidents at the Dallas Zoo. According to reports, the whole thing started on the morning of January 13th when keepers at the zoo discovered that a cut had been made 4 feet high in the wire mesh surrounding the Langer monkey enclosure. When staff went to investigate, they found that all of the monkeys were still there. However, part of the climbing structure inside the habitat was broken, leading them to believe that something larger than just the monkeys had been inside. No sooner had this unfolded than keepers at the nearby snow leopard enclosure realized this exhibit had also been tampered with. Alarmingly though, this time, a female snow leopard named Nova was nowhere to be found. The discovery triggered a code blue, prompting the Dallas Police SWAT team to be called to the scene. Though the SWAT team brought high-tech equipment and expertise with them, none of it turned out to be necessary. Hilariously, a squirrel spotted the missing snow leopard before any human on site, and gave away its presence by making a sound that squirrels use to alert each other of danger. Thankfully, Nova was recovered a short time later, safe and sound. Just over a week later, though, things took a dark turn when Dallas Zoo staff found a lappet-faced vulture named Pin dead in its enclosure. Sadly, Pin had been at the facility for 33 years and was considered to be endangered. Multiple reports state that the bird died of a stab wound, though it's unclear if this has been confirmed. Needless to say, zoo officials were on high alert after this, but unfortunately, they would be hit a third time on January 30th, when it was discovered that 2 emperor tamarin monkeys named Bella and Finn were missing. Wasting no time, the zoo put out a reward for $25,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction. Authorities also released an image of a young man who they thought might have been involved. With this photo and reward in circulation, it took little time for the public to respond. By February 1st, Bella and Finn had been safely recovered from an abandoned home in the city of Lancaster, and the following day, the man seen in the photo was arrested. The suspect has since been identified as 24-year-old Davian Irwin, and he was apparently located by police not far from the Dallas World Aquarium. According to reports, Irwin is now facing 6 animal cruelty charges in connection with the Emperor Tamarin monkey thefts, as well as 2 counts of burglary to a building in connection with the Langer monkey and snow leopard enclosure tampering. Police are reportedly still looking into whether he had anything to do with the death of Pin the Vulture. At the time of this recording, zoo officials say that they are still on edge and have no idea what motivated the string of crimes. They say that they have bumped up security measures at the facility and will be adding more cameras, guards, and night patrols of the grounds in the hopes of preventing further incidents. Authorities in Martin County, Florida say that a disgruntled Philadelphia Eagles fan got his wings clipped this week after he went full bird brain inside of a local firehouse. According to reports, the incident began just after 10 p.m. when the angry football fan, later identified as 25-year-old Edward D'Alessandro, broke into the Hutchinson Island Fire Station on Northeast Ocean Boulevard in the city of Stuart. Once inside, the 25-year-old allegedly ransacked the bunk rooms, stole a uniform hat, some knives, and $126 cash. Oh yeah, he also pissed on an area of carpeted floor for some reason. When firefighters confronted D'Alessandro, he responded by throwing a meat cleaver at them. Fortunately, firefighters were able to restrain and hold the 25-year-old until police arrived. D'Alessandro was placed under arrest and is now facing several charges, including armed burglary, aggravated assault on a firefighter, and theft. As for a motive behind the crime, police haven't said for sure, though multiple reports insinuated that it had to do with the Eagles' Super Bowl loss that night. As stupid as that would surely be, it's unclear exactly why D'Alessandro thought the fire department was to blame. Unfortunately, there's no word on whether any of the firefighters were big Kansas City Chiefs fans. At the time of this recording, D'Alessandro remains in custody at the Martin County Jail on a $120,000 bond. In case you needed reminding that nothing is sacred anymore, police in Las Vegas, Nevada say that one of America's greatest national treasures was desecrated this week. What am I talking about, you ask? Why, the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, of course. That's right, not even the country's beloved hot dog-shaped vehicles are safe. According to reports, the team in charge of the 27-foot-long hot dog on wheels noticed that its catalytic converter had been stolen on February 10th after it had spent the previous night parked outside of a local motel. The Wienermobile was in town for a number of promotional events related to Super Bowl weekend. Thankfully, a crack squad of mechanics at a local auto shop were able to find a suitable part to make a temporary fix so that the Wienermobile could stick to its planned schedule, though team members say it will likely be a couple of months before they can actually get the proper parts to fix it. All joking aside though, the whole thing is a perfect example of the sad state of affairs regarding the rampant rise in catalytic converter thefts across North America in the past few years. According to reports, between 2019 and 2020 alone, incidents like this more than quadrupled. The thefts are reportedly driven by the increasingly high value of the metals contained within the converters, making them an attractive option for would-be thieves. At the time of this recording, it's unclear if police have any leads on those responsible for the Wienermobile case.
Representatives from the LAPD say that they're investigating a bizarre case this week after a man allegedly threatened to blow up an iconic California landmark, only to immediately be foiled by his apparent lack of knowledge of geography. According to reports, the incident took place sometime on February 19th when a man called police with an alarming threat. Unless they agreed to pay him $10,000, he was going to blow up the famous Hollywood sign that overlooks Los Angeles. While the situation was already quite strange to begin with, things almost immediately got even weirder. You see, the suspect had messed up. He wasn't on the phone with police in Hollywood, California. He had accidentally called authorities in Hollywood, Florida instead, a city roughly 2,700 miles away from his alleged target on the complete opposite side of the country. Of course, police in Florida still relayed the threat to their counterparts in Los Angeles. They were able to determine that the threat against the Hollywood sign was not credible. At the time of this recording, no arrests have apparently been made in the case, and it's unclear if investigators have identified the hapless suspect behind the bungled threat. The situation is still developing.
Authorities in Tulsa, Oklahoma say that a local man is facing charges this week following a strange incident in which he dined at a local restaurant, paid for his meal, and then allegedly decided to rob the place. According to reports, the situation unfolded shortly before midnight on February 25th, when police were called to the Waffle House on 11th Street at Highway 169 with reports of a robbery. When they arrived, staff told them that the suspect, later identified as Victor Don Juan Medina, had held them at gunpoint and demanded cash from the register before running off. Not long after, police were able to find Medina, who was apparently running along a retaining wall on the nearby highway. He was taken into custody without incident and is now facing a charge of robbery with a firearm. Weirdly though, Waffle House employees say that there's a little more to the story. Apparently before the robbery, Medina had come in and sat down for a meal. He paid his bill in full and even tipped his server. It was only then that he pulled out the gun. It seems the one thing Medina can't be accused of is dining and dashing. At the time of this recording, he remains held in the Tulsa County Jail. No employees were injured as a result of the crime. Representatives from the Manitoba branch of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were apparently prompted to put out a public service announcement this week after they had to caution a woman about abusing the 911 system when she called them to complain about the wait at a fast food restaurant. According to reports, the incident took place sometime on February 23rd when the unidentified woman dialed the emergency number while at a new Burger King location in the city of Steinbach. Police say that she called because she was angry that, in her words, the line at the drive-thru was too long. Understandably, she was told that this did not constitute an emergency and was warned not to call for something like this in the future. The Manitoba RCMP tweeted about the incident the following day, saying in part, quote, "We realize you aren't you when you're hangry, but this is not a valid reason to dial 911. All joking aside, RCMP spokesman Tara Seal reminded the public in an interview with the CBC that this kind of thing is actually rooted in a serious issue, saying, quote, "When you call 911 for a non-emergent matter, that can tie up an operator who could be dealing with a real emergency." Seal went on to say that the Burger King woman isn't the only person they've had to caution about this recently. Apparently, and prepare yourself because this is quite the Canadian stereotype, they had to tell someone else off after they called 911 to ask where they could find a Zamboni for that weekend, presumably so that they could resurface a hockey rink. So, let me be the first to say on behalf of my fellow Canadians out there, that is truly embarrassing. And let's all try to stop f***ing doing that in the future. Authorities in Carroll County, Virginia announced this week that a 35-year-old woman is facing charges after a recent bizarre incident in which she allegedly tried to break into a man's house while naked and attacked him with a frying pan. The whole situation unfolded sometime on the night of February 26th, when the unidentified victim heard a strange sound coming from the rear of his home on Loafers Rest Road in the community of Austinville. When the man went to investigate, he found a woman who he did not know, later identified as 35-year-old Paula Michelle Locklear, who was allegedly breaking in through the back door into his kitchen. Strangely, Locklear didn't have any clothes on, but she did have a frying pan. When the homeowner confronted the 35-year-old, she allegedly attacked. According to reports, the victim was hit in the head and hand with the frying pan, though was eventually able to push Locklear back outside and secure the door. That's when she apparently began to switch off the electrical breakers running to the home and beating on the kitchen window. At the same time, she was allegedly screaming at the homeowner to, quote, "get out of her house, or she was going to kill him." The homeowner reportedly responded by shooting Locklear in the lower leg. When authorities arrived at the scene, Locklear was taken for treatment at a local hospital. She was then arrested and transported to the Carroll County Jail on charges of felony breaking and entering of an occupied home while armed with a deadly weapon to commit larceny, assault and battery, and intentional damage to property. The homeowner was not charged with anything after it was determined he was acting in self-defense. Representatives from the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority's Transit Police say that a 57-year-old Boston man is facing several charges this week after he allegedly made bizarre threats against fellow subway riders with his equally unusual choice of pet. The incident reportedly took place at around 4 p.m. on March 16th, when the suspect, later identified as 57-year-old Jeffrey Stuart, started yelling and threatening commuters at Oak Grove Station in the city of Malden. The bulk of these threats allegedly involved Stewart's pet rat, who he named Jerry, whom the 57-year-old was apparently waving in people's faces. After being told to leave the station, Stewart initially seemed to comply, though allegedly came back a short time later and tried to get back in. When police responded, Stewart apparently swore at them, then tried to threaten them with Jerry the rat as well. Stewart was then placed under arrest. According to reports, the 57-year-old is well known to police for causing disturbances on the subway system. At the time of his arrest this week, he was also allegedly in possession of an open bottle of vodka. He is now facing charges of disorderly conduct, trespassing, and threats to commit a crime. Jerry the rat, meanwhile, was turned over to animal control. This was reportedly distressing news to Stewart, whose attorney claims is concerned about his pet and wants him back. Representatives from the Ohio State Patrol say that a roadside sign meant to help catch drunk drivers definitely did its job this week, though perhaps in a more literal way than it was intended. According to reports, the incident began sometime on St. Patrick's Day when the State Patrol received a call about a potentially impaired driver in a blue sedan in the village of Batavia. When officers arrived at the scene along State Route 32, they spotted the vehicle in question. It was now in rough shape at the side of the highway. It didn't take long to piece together what had happened. The vehicle's allegedly drunk driver had crashed straight into a roadside sign, ironically, one displaying information on how to report impaired drivers. Though the sign hadn't performed exactly as intended, it had possibly saved lives all the same. No one was injured as a result of the crash, and the unidentified driver was arrested at the scene for operating a vehicle while impaired. Authorities in Las Vegas, Nevada say that a 25-year-old man is facing numerous charges this week after he was arrested for a fatal carjacking that took place on New Year's Day. According to reports, the case began at around 1:34 a.m. that morning when Las Vegas police received a call from the 62-year-old victim, Roy Cridler. Roy said that he had been attacked and that his car had been stolen outside of Play It Again Sam's Gentlemen's Club. When officers arrived at the scene, Cridler explained that he had been giving the suspect a ride, but that he had become violent when he didn't drop him off where he had wanted. At that point, the suspect had pulled him out of the car by his arm, causing him to fall and hit his head on the pavement. Cridler tried to run after the suspect, but was threatened with a knife, after which the man drove away. While speaking with police, Cridler said that his head hurt and that he needed to sit down. Moments later, he fell unconscious. Though authorities rushed him to a local hospital, sadly, it was too late. He was pronounced dead less than an hour later. The cause was determined to be acute coronary artery thrombosis. Essentially, a clot had dislodged from his arteries and killed him due to the blow to his head. The morning after the carjacking, police were able to spot Cridler's stolen vehicle. It had been captured on a traffic camera with a man inside. That man, later identified as 25-year-old Chandler McLeod, became the primary suspect. However, by the time officers arrived at the place where the car had been spotted, it was no longer there. The vehicle was finally recovered on January 10th, about 200 yards east of the access ramp on the east side of Valley View Boulevard. It had sustained fire damage and looked as though someone had deliberately put urine and feces inside. Fortunately, a DNA sample was recovered, which pointed straight to McLeod. McLeod himself was finally tracked down on March 9th, at which point he was placed under arrest. At the time, he reportedly confessed to the carjacking, though did not specify how he knew Cridler or why the man had given him a ride in the first place. As for the burned car, McLeod said he had done this to try and hide DNA evidence when he couldn't find bleach. He had likewise used the urine and feces in the hopes that it would cover any DNA he had left behind. It's unclear where he obtained the bodily excrement or who it belonged to. At the time of this recording, McLeod remains in custody. He is now facing several charges, including murder, robbery, grand larceny of a vehicle, and destruction or concealment of evidence. Authorities in the city of Warren, Michigan say that a local man has been arrested and is facing charges this week after he flew into a violent rage and allegedly assaulted a store employee with a rather unusual weapon. According to reports, the whole thing went down on the evening of April 2nd when the 60-year-old suspect, M.D. Jabul Hussein, walked into the Desi Fruit Market on 9 Mile Road. It was around 7:15 p.m. and Hussein had planned to do some shopping. However, things took a turn for the worse when he approached the store's fish counter and was told that it was closed. An employee apologized, saying that the fish counter closed at 7 p.m. that night due to different store hours for Ramadan. Apparently, this wasn't a good enough explanation for Hussein, who proceeded to argue with the clerk. When that failed, he allegedly picked up a 4-pound frozen herring and used it to repeatedly strike the employee in the head. While Hussein's choice of weapon was admittedly amusing, the injuries it inflicted were definitely no joke. Apparently, the employee had to be taken to the hospital after the attack. Hussein, meanwhile, was arrested and charged with misdemeanor aggravated assault. Speaking about the case after the fact, County Prosecutor Peter Lucido said, quote, "I never thought I'd have to say this, but if you assault someone with a fish in our county, you will be prosecuted. A frozen fish is dangerous if you use it to hit someone on the head." Authorities in York County, Pennsylvania say that a 25-year-old man is facing a number of charges this week after he allegedly stole a school bus and led police on a chase, only to offer quite the strange excuse when he was caught. According to reports, the incident began at around 7:10 a.m. on April 4th, when officers at the Carroll Township police station received a call about a stolen school bus. The bus had been reported stolen earlier that morning in Adams County, after which a be on the lookout alert had been released. The caller stated that they had now spotted the bus, which had the words Lincoln Coach Lines written on the side, driving at a parking lot in Dillsburg. When officers caught up to the bus, it was driving north on Route 15. An attempt was made to conduct a traffic stop, and though the driver initially pulled over, he sped off again soon afterwards. A chase began, during which time the suspect, later identified as 25-year-old Tony Saunders, allegedly weaved dangerously in and out of traffic and nearly overturned the vehicle. Saunders did finally stop the bus after pulling into a neighborhood in Lower Allen Township, though according to police, he still had no intention of turning himself in. Instead, he proceeded to lead them on a foot chase, at first disappearing through a wooded area before once again being spotted running through a busy parking lot. By this time, he had apparently stripped off his clothing and was completely nude. He was eventually caught and placed under arrest. Once in custody, Saunders allegedly admitted to stealing the school bus, saying that he had taken it after crashing a BMW. He also offered this bizarre excuse. He said that he had stolen the vehicle and had placed a dead deer in the back and had planned to drive the bus to his house so he could use the deer as fertilizer for his garden. Saunders has now been charged with fleeing or attempting to elude officers, receiving stolen property, reckless driving, and resisting arrest. Authorities in Phoenix, Arizona released an update in a bizarre theft case this week, saying that a rather unique piece of stolen property had been successfully recovered thanks in part to a Pokemon game. According to reports, the whole situation began on the night of March 25th when a trio of unidentified thieves hit a local Dairy Queen Grill and Chill location. Now, they didn't take any money. Instead, the suspects, a woman and two men, were there for the restaurant's 15-foot spoon sculpture, which sits outside the building and is modeled off of the iconic red spoons that the chain serves with its blizzards. The suspects proceeded to remove the spoon from its base before loading it onto the bed of a pickup truck and driving off. The owners of the DQ franchise, Ramon and Pooja Kalra, were devastated, but did their best to come up with a creative solution. Because replacing the spoon would have cost them an estimated $7,000, they instead reached out to the community for help on social media. They also had t-shirts printed for their staff members that read, "Where's my spoon?" Thankfully, on April 3rd, the mystery was finally solved when a 52-year-old man named Michael Foster found the spoon near a local middle school. He reportedly stumbled across it while playing the mobile game Pokemon Go. Foster managed to recover the spoon with a little help, which he then turned over to police. They apparently had to strap the thing to the top of a squad car to transport it from the scene. At the time of this recording, police say that they are still searching for the three perpetrators responsible for the bizarre crime. Authorities in Polk County, Iowa say that a local family were recently left traumatized after a man walked into their apartment in the middle of the night and watched one of them sleep while doing a variety of strange things around their residence. According to reports, the incident took place in the early morning hours of April 1st at the Prairie Lakes apartment complex in the city of Ankeny. It was sometime after 3 a.m. when the unidentified family surveillance camera captured 23-year-old Dan Ibamena, who got in through the unit's unlocked front door. Once inside, Ibamena could be seen doing a variety of things such as organizing shoes and playing around with a pair of socks. However, he became particularly fixated on the homeowner's mother, who was staying over and was asleep on the couch at the time. During the 30 minutes that Ibamena was in the apartment, he stared at the woman on the couch repeatedly. He also wrote a note that the family says was mostly gibberish, save for one creepy thing that could be made out. It said something about watching the woman sleep. The sleeping woman was finally awoken when Ibamena allegedly touched her knee. Startled, the woman asked the 23-year-old who he was, only for him to reportedly answer, quote, "I'm the guy who dropped you off last night." At this, the woman began yelling for her son. However, by the time he got there, Ibamena had already run off. He apparently took some of the family's socks with him. After images and videos of the bizarre encounter were shared online, along with appeals from police, Ibamena reportedly turned himself in. Authorities say that he has now been charged with 2 counts of trespassing. While the woman on the couch who experienced the creepy ordeal came out and said that she believes that the charges should have been more severe, authorities say that there was no evidence that Ibamena actually had any bad intentions. One spokesman for the police stated that the surveillance video might actually have helped Ibamena in this case, just because the stuff he was doing came off more as strange than threatening. Police went on to say that they believe alcohol might have played a role in the bizarre crime. Authorities in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina say that a 24-year-old man is facing felony charges this week after he allegedly threatened to kill his ex-wife while trying to ruin the mood for her and her new boyfriend. According to reports, the incident took place in the early morning hours of April 21st, when 24-year-old Alan Riggs started to hear noises coming from one of the bedrooms of the duplex that he shares with his ex-wife, 24-year-old Jolynn Wolfrey. He quickly realized that these were the sounds of his ex and her new boyfriend getting busy, so to speak. While the former husband and wife had chosen to continue to live together in the same house for the past 2 years despite getting divorced, apparently on this particular night things got to be too much for Riggs. He banged on the walls to try and get Jolynn and the boyfriend's attention, but when this failed, he decided to be more direct. That's when he grabbed and allegedly cocked his handgun. When Jolynn came out to grab a glass of water, Riggs reportedly ambushed her with the firearm. He then allegedly told her that she would die if she went upstairs. Jolynn responded by calling the police. When officers arrived, Riggs was apparently playing a game on his cell phone like nothing had happened. When asked about the incident, though, he confessed, saying that he, quote, wanted to ruin the mood for his ex-wife and her boyfriend. He was arrested and is now facing a felony charge of domestic violence. Representatives from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District of California say that a YouTuber and former X-Games snowboarder has agreed to plead guilty to federal charges this week after he deliberately crashed a plane to gain views on his channel, then allegedly attempted to cover up the crime by destroying evidence. The incident began on November 24, 2021, when Trevor Daniel Jacob took off on a solo flight in his airplane from Lompoc City Airport. The 29-year-old claimed that he was flying to Mammoth Lakes. However, investigators now say that this was never his intention. Instead, they claim that he planned to eject from the plane midway through the flight and record footage of the resulting crash, as well as himself parachuting to the ground. According to reports, prior to taking off, Jacob mounted several video cameras on different parts of the plane. He also brought a parachute, another camera to take footage of himself with, and a selfie stick. About 35 minutes after takeoff that day, while he was above the Los Padres National Forest near Santa Maria, Jacob made his jump. After parachuting to the ground, he reportedly collected the footage from the plane, which had crashed into an area of dry brush, before hiking out of the forest. Authorities say it wasn't until 2 days later, on November 26th, that Jacob notified the National Transportation Safety Board about the crash. The agency told him that he was responsible for preserving the wreckage so that they could examine it, to which Jacob allegedly agreed. The NTSB launched an investigation that day, while the Federal Aviation Administration launched their own investigation 3 days later. However, in the weeks following the crash, both agencies say that Jacob repeatedly lied to their investigators. He apparently said that he had jumped from his plane because of a full power loss, and stated that the engine had quit and he could not identify any safe landing options. He also claimed that he could not find the place where the plane had crashed. In the meantime, authorities say Jacob actually returned to the site with a helicopter, which he used to airlift the plane wreckage a short distance before loading it onto a truck and taking it to a hangar. It was here that he allegedly destroyed the plane before disposing of the parts in various locations, in what officials say was an intentional bid to obstruct the ongoing federal investigations into the incident. On December 23, 2021, Jacob then posted a video using the footage he had allegedly collected from the wreckage site called "I Crashed My Airplane." The video is still up on YouTube, where it currently has more than 4 million views. We'll include a link in the description below for anyone interested. According to reports, after the NTSB and FAA were able to piece together what had happened, discovering that Jacob had actually orchestrated the entire stunt for YouTube views, he was charged with 1 count of destruction and concealment with the intent to obstruct a federal investigation. The 29-year-old agreed to plead guilty to the charge this week and could now be facing a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Jacob's pilot license was also revoked in 2022. Representatives from North Carolina's Boone Police Department extended their gratitude to an unlikely group of crime fighters this week after they say that they were instrumental in helping them to find and arrest a fleeing suspect. According to reports, it all started sometime on May 9th when Boone police officers attempted to conduct a traffic stop on a vehicle being driven by a 34-year-old man named Joshua Russell Minton. However, instead of pulling over, Minton allegedly drove off, leading police on a chase. The pursuit continued until Minton abandoned his vehicle and fled on foot near the intersection of U.S. Highways 421 and 221 in an undeveloped area of the community of Deep Gap. Because the 34-year-old had been driving quickly and recklessly, he was apparently quite far ahead of police when he took off running. So much so that officers didn't get a good look at which direction he had headed, making them initially think that they had lost him. Unfortunately for the 34-year-old, though, his luck soon ran out when an unlikely group came to the aid of police. This group was none other than a herd of cows, who were more than happy to lead officers right to the place in their pasture where Minton was hiding. He was placed under arrest and subsequently charged with felony fleeing/eluding arrest with a motor vehicle, driving with a revoked license, and disorderly conduct. In a Facebook post announcing the bizarre arrest, Boone police jokingly weighed the pros and cons of adding cows to the force full-time, writing in part, quote, "As we examine the obvious next steps of incorporating a bovine tracking unit into our apartment's law enforcement capabilities, there are many factors that we will have to consider. How adaptable are cows to a variety of police work, or can they just find hiding suspects? Are cows more cost-effective than canine units? How will we transport cows to the scenes? And is this compatible with the town's sustainability goals in terms of types of vehicles needed? And obviously, there are methane issues." Authorities in Harford County, Maryland say that a 38-year-old man was returned to jail just hours after being released last week when he allegedly stole a privately owned military vehicle and led police on a chase. The incident reportedly began at around 6:35 p.m. on May 12th, when the county sheriff's office received 911 calls about a vehicle theft in the town of Bel Air. Police were told that a man, later identified as 38-year-old Michael Stevens II, had stolen a military vehicle from an address on the 900 block of Rock Spring Road. The vehicle in question was a 1986 923A 5-ton military truck. According to reports, the truck's owner had spotted Stevens while he was out driving off with it and had jumped on in an attempt to deter him. However, the man was forced to bail when he realized that Stevens had no intention of stopping. Luckily, he was not injured. Authorities later spotted Stevens driving the military truck down Route 24, and a pursuit began, continuing when the 38-year-old made his way onto Interstate 95. Multiple attempts were made to disable the truck using stop sticks, however, these were unsuccessful. In the meantime, Stevens crashed into several other vehicles on the road, though reportedly never exceeded speeds of about 50 miles per hour. The chase finally came to an end in Baltimore when the suspect turned down a street and apparently realized it was too narrow to properly maneuver the large truck. At this point, he jumped out and tried to run on foot, though was quickly caught and placed under arrest. Police say that Stevens is now facing charges including motor vehicle theft, first-degree assault, second-degree assault, and failing to obey a lawful order. Following the incident, he was returned to the Harford County Detention Center, from which he had only been released hours earlier on another unrelated theft charge. Representatives from South Carolina's Anderson County Sheriff's Office say that a couple of accused drug traffickers seriously messed up last month when one of them tried to make a run for it during a traffic stop, only to accidentally reveal their illegal haul. According to reports, the whole thing took place on April 12th when the Sheriff's Office's Special Investigation Division and Directed Patrol units were conducting a, quote, proactive patrol along Interstate 85. As part of the operation, they pulled over a man and woman, later identified as Anthony Miller and Samika Mitchum. While speaking with the pair, police became suspicious when they asked Mitchum, who appeared visibly pregnant, about her due date. She and Miller had given officers completely different answers. Upon realizing that things weren't going well, Mitchum allegedly tried to make a run for it. When she did, it quickly became clear to police why her story hadn't added up. It turned out that Mitchum wasn't really pregnant at all. She was wearing a fake belly which was loaded with nearly 3.5 pounds of cocaine. Not only that, when she started running, the whole thing reportedly came loose, causing the drugs to fall out onto the ground. Needless to say, Mitchum and Miller were arrested at the scene, and both are now facing charges of trafficking over 400 grams of cocaine. If you're a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week series, then you'll know that we've covered our fair share of absurd DUI stories. However, this next one might just be the most ridiculous we've heard yet. Representatives from Colorado's Springfield Police Department say that a man is facing a number of charges this week after he was pulled over for a traffic violation and tried to get out of the situation by blaming his dog. According to reports, the whole thing went down at approximately 11:30 p.m. on May 13th, when police spotted a male driver speeding near 7th and Main Street. He was reportedly traveling 53 miles per hour in a 30 zone. When the man was pulled over, however, officers quickly witnessed something unbelievable. They apparently watched in disbelief as the man switched places with his dog, who up until that point had been riding in the front passenger seat. He then got out through the passenger side door and allegedly proceeded to tell police that his dog had been the one driving. Apparently realizing that this ludicrous excuse was not going to work, the man then reportedly tried to take off on foot, though he only made it about 20 yards before being caught and arrested. Police said that to their complete lack of surprise, the unidentified suspect showed signs of being intoxicated. The man was booked into the Baca County Jail, where he was subsequently charged with driving under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs, driving while ability impaired, driving under suspension, speeding 20 to 24 over the speed limit, and resisting arrest. In a Facebook post released by the Springfield Police Department after the incident, police joked that, quote, "The dog does not face any charges and was let go with just a warning." Commenters were also quick to get in on the action, with one person saying, quote, "He was too drunk to use a GPS, so he got a guide dog," and another chiming in, quote, "I wish my dog could drive." The animal is reportedly now in the care of one of the suspect's acquaintances. In other nightmarish roommate-related crime news, authorities in Louisville, Kentucky say that a 64-year-old man has been arrested and is facing charges this week after he allegedly shot his roommate during an argument that began over freezer food. According to reports, the incident began sometime on the night of May 20th when the suspect, 64-year-old Clifton Williams, discovered that his roommate had eaten the last Hot Pocket out of their freezer. This apparently caused him to fly into a rage, which quickly escalated when Williams started throwing tiles at the victim. In a later interview with police, the roommate said that he first, quote, "attempted to fight back by trying to beat his ass." However, this apparently failed, causing the man instead to try and flee the residence. When he did, Williams allegedly retrieved a handgun. The victim reportedly yelled for him not to shoot, but was ignored, and ended up getting shot in the butt. That's when he ran off to get help. He was treated at a local hospital for non-life-threatening injuries. Williams was arrested several hours later and has now been charged with felony assault. He is currently being held at the Jefferson County Jail in lieu of $7,500 bond. Unfortunately, reports do not mention which flavor of Hot Pocket led to the attack. Authorities in Duluth, Minnesota say that a 37-year-old man is facing serious charges this week following a bizarre incident in which he trashed and set his own rental property on fire with his tenants still inside. According to reports, the situation began at around 4 a.m. on May 18th when police were called to a duplex on West 4th Street. Upon arriving, officers saw that the second floor of the building was engulfed in flames. That wasn't all, though. After listening for a second, it became clear that someone was blasting the Billy Joel song "We Didn't Start the Fire" on a stereo from inside the flaming residence. While firefighters battled the blaze, investigators spoke to witnesses who said that they had been awoken about a half hour earlier by the owner of the building, 37-year-old Travis Carlson. Carlson, who bought the building in 2005 and reportedly lived on the second floor where the fire broke out, was heard smashing and breaking things in his upstairs unit that morning. A neighbor said that they saw the 37-year-old breaking his own windows while wearing a helmet before going downstairs and getting underneath his truck with some gas cans. It's believed that Carlson drilled the tank of his vehicle, filled up the gas cans, and then used the fuel as an accelerant to start the blaze. A fireball was seen erupting from upstairs a short time later, after which Carlson knocked on his tenants' doors and informed them that the building was in flames. Thankfully, no one was hurt as a result of the bizarre incident, other than Carlson, who sustained burns to his legs and arms. He was arrested the following day and is now facing first-degree arson charges. If convicted, he could face up to 20 years in prison. Unfortunately, at the time of this recording, it appears that no information is available about what motivated the strange crime. Authorities in York County, South Carolina say that a 25-year-old man is facing serious charges this week after he allegedly robbed a local convenience store using a fake gun from an old Nintendo set. According to reports, the incident took place at around 5:45 p.m. on May 30th, when the suspect, later identified as 25-year-old David Joseph D'Alessandro, walked into a quick-stop store on York Street in the town of Sharon. He was allegedly dressed in a mask and hooded sweatshirt and proceeded to walk to the cash register before flashing what appeared to be a gun in his waistband at an employee and demanding cash. The clerk handed over $300, after which D'Alessandro reportedly fled the scene. Apparently, the 25-year-old wasn't in any hurry, as police spotted him just down the street at a neighboring Dollar General a short time later. He was placed under arrest, at which time police discovered that the weapon in his possession was not a real gun, but actually a zapper used to play games like Duck Hunt on the old Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, if you're familiar with what these look like, you might be asking yourself how the convenience store employee could have mistaken it for the real thing. Well, it appears that D'Alessandro did at least have the foresight to spray paint the zapper black before allegedly carrying out the crime. At the time of this recording, the 25-year-old is now facing charges including armed robbery with a deadly weapon, wearing a mask, and petty larceny of less than $2,000. He remains in custody without bond. Authorities in Montgomery County, Texas say that a pair of teenage pranksters are potentially looking at some serious prison time after an ill-considered gag caused their classmates to quite literally gag, forcing school evacuations and a large investigation. According to reports, it all started on May 3rd when students at Caney Creek High School began to complain of a noxious gas smell on various parts of the campus. The building was evacuated and a response team was sent in to conduct testing. However, the smell seemed to dissipate and no issues were detected with the building's air quality. Classes were resumed normally the following day. However, a second evacuation had to be carried out after the same powerfully disgusting odor returned shortly before lunch. This time, multiple students were taken to a local hospital for evaluation after they complained of nausea and headaches. The school remained closed on May 5th as a thorough investigation was launched, revealing the source: a can of Hensgocht fart spray. According to reports, the fart spray in question can be purchased online, where it is marketed as a joke gift that, quote, smells like 14th century sewage. However, police now claim that the spray meets the legal criteria of a chemical dispensing device. After further investigation, authorities arrested 2 students at the high school, 17-year-old David Navarrete Arce and 18-year-old Diego Flores, in connection with the incident. This was after surveillance footage taken from the school reportedly showed one of the teens in possession of the fart spray, and witnesses came forward saying that another bottle had been confiscated from the other suspect. Both boys have now been charged with possession of a prohibited weapon, a third-degree felony. The charge is reportedly punishable by up to 10 years in prison. While one of the teen's lawyers says she believes her client was overcharged, a representative from the district attorney's office argued in a statement that, quote, the incident goes beyond the scope of a benign school prank. In their reasoning behind the charges, authorities also cited the large amount of resources that were wasted on shutting down classes and investigating the situation. Representatives from the Orlando Police Department say that one of their officers has been relieved from duty and is facing several charges this week following a strange recent incident in which he was allegedly caught speeding by an officer from a different department and refused to pull over or cooperate. According to reports, the situation unfolded early in the afternoon on June 6th, when a deputy with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office spotted an Orlando police SUV whip past him on a rural road. At the time, the Orlando cruiser's lights were not on, meaning that the officer inside was not on his way to the scene of an emergency. Yet, he was still traveling 80 miles per hour in a 45 zone. After turning around, the Seminole County deputy began pursuing the Orlando police officer, later identified as Alexander Shoney. According to the deputy, he needed to drive at speeds of over 100 miles per hour to catch up. However, even when he did, Shoney ignored the deputy's lights and sirens and refused to pull over. When Shoney finally did stop, he was immediately aggressive with the Seminole County deputy, demanding to know what was going on. Body cam footage of their brief exchange has since been released, in which Shoney can be heard angrily saying that he is on his way to work and refusing to hand over his driver's license. He then flees the scene in his vehicle while the deputy calls for backup. According to reports, Shoney was later arrested over the incident and is now facing charges including resisting an officer, reckless driving, and fleeing and eluding a law enforcement officer with active sirens. In a statement, Orlando police also announced that Shoney was relieved of duty pending an investigation. Representatives from Oklahoma's Tulsa Police Department say that 3 people have been arrested in connection with a recent robbery this week, one which was allegedly organized by the apparent victim as part of a harebrained scheme to get out of work. The incident began on June 5th when police were called to a gas station convenience store at East 61st Street and South Lewis Avenue with reports of a robbery. When officers arrived, they were greeted by the store's clerk, Isaiah Jones, who said that he had been held up by an unknown man. The man had passed him a note threatening to shoot unless he handed over the business's money, so Jones said that he had complied. Though police initially had no reason to doubt Isaiah's version of events, that all changed 3 days later when they tracked down the alleged robber, Stephen Jones. Jones admitted to carrying out the crime, but stated that he had actually been hired to commit the robbery by a friend named Ellijay Locke. Locke was tracked down and arrested herself on an outstanding warrant the following day, leading to the final missing piece of the puzzle. She said that she had been hired by Isaiah Jones, who paid her after the robbery had been carried out. Text messages between her and the store clerk backed up her story. Apparently, though, money wasn't the actual motive behind the crime. Instead, in the messages, Isaiah reportedly stated that he wanted his friends to rob the convenience store because he was tired and wanted to leave work early. All 3 suspects have since been arrested, though so far only Isaiah and Stephen Jones have been charged. Isaiah is now facing charges of embezzlement and conspiracy to commit a felony, while Stephen Jones has been charged with conspiracy to commit embezzlement as well as a weapons charge. In a post to the department's Facebook page, the Tulsa police joked about the incident, writing, quote, "Our human resources department, and likely every HR department in the world, would like to advise people that this is not the recommended way to leave work early." A bizarre recent burglary case in Vancouver, British Columbia seems to be wrapping up with an unexpectedly happy ending for everyone involved this week, after the suspect apparently apologized for his actions and the victim managed to get a bit of well-earned buzz for her bakery business. According to reports, the strange case began near the end of May when the unidentified suspect smashed his way into Sweet Something, a bakery located in Vancouver's Dunbar neighborhood. In footage captured by the store's surveillance cameras, the man could be seen standing around outside of the business for some time before first slamming up against the front entrance and then kicking his way through the glass door. Once inside, it appears the suspect was in no hurry. He explored the bakery, sat down for some time, investigated the business's items, and even snapped a few selfies with the store's phone, wearing a pair of bright orange sunglasses. It seems that he was also concerned about the mess he had made during his entrance, as eventually he found a mop and bucket and attempted to clean up the glass on the floor. When he finally left the bakery over an hour later, the only thing he took with him was a box of 6 chocolate champagne cupcakes. Needless to say, when the business's owner, Emma Irvine, reviewed the surveillance video of the entire incident the next day, she was both confused and exasperated. After reporting the break-in to police, she also posted the strange footage to social media detailing what had happened, which quickly went viral. One of those who saw it was apparently the suspect himself, who promptly reached out to apologize profusely. In addition to the apology, Irvine says that the man offered to pay for the cupcakes he stole, as well as all of the damage to her business. He also promised to throw in the orange sunglasses he wore during the break-in. In an interview with the news outlet the CBC, Irvine said that she felt the man was sincere and that she has since asked police not to press charges. She also stated that the incident has inspired a new cupcake design at her bakery, one that features an edible replica of the iconic orange sunglasses and is aptly named Crime of Passion. Authorities in Josephine County, Oregon say that a 66-year-old man has a good chance of spending the rest of his life behind bars after he was convicted this week in connection with a bizarre booby-trapping incident that seriously injured an FBI agent. According to reports, 66-year-old Gregory Lee Rodvelt's problems with law enforcement started in April of 2017, when he was pulled over by police in Sun City, Arizona, after being accused of brandishing a gun at an unidentified victim. Instead of coming quietly, Rodvelt barricaded himself inside his vehicle, leading to a 7-hour standoff that involved multiple law enforcement agencies and forced a partial shutdown of U.S. Route 60. He eventually surrendered and was subsequently sentenced to 5 years in prison on charges of unlawful possession of explosives. Around the time of his sentencing, Rodvelt's 15-acre property in the community of Williams was seized due to lack of payment and was due to be sold off. And while the 66-year-old was now in prison, he was allowed to return to the home for 2 weeks to prepare it for the sale. Unbeknownst to authorities, he used this time to rig the place with countless booby traps designed to hurt or potentially kill anyone who entered. Among the disturbing devices officers found during their September 2018 raid of the property was a minivan outfitted with the spring-loaded jaws of animal snares, as well as a large round hot tub which had been placed on its side and set with a tripwire. The trap, which was apparently reminiscent of the iconic boulder scene in the 1981 film Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, was apparently designed so that anyone who opened the property gate would be crushed by the rolling hot tub. While officers managed to avoid most of the booby traps set by Rodvelt, unfortunately, one FBI agent wasn't so lucky. After blasting through the front door of the home, the agent unwittingly moved a wheelchair that had been left in the entryway, which had been rigged to fire a shotgun with a fishing line. The agent took a shotgun slug to the knee, forcing authorities to abandon the raid altogether. Thankfully, the agent survived. This week, a jury found Rodvelt guilty of assaulting a federal officer with a deadly or dangerous weapon. At the time of this recording, the 66-year-old is still awaiting sentencing, though faces a maximum punishment of up to 20 years in federal prison. Authorities in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania say that they were recently tasked with hunting down a rather unique fugitive, one who apparently stretched the limits of their policing capabilities and resources. According to reports, it all started sometime early last week when multiple residents began reporting sightings of the suspect in question in the country's Hamilton Park neighborhood. Nobody knew where the strange transient had come from, but it appeared that he was living off the land. He was given the name Hamilton as police began a search, though for days they were unsuccessful in locating him. Finally, on June 15th, police received their most promising tip yet, when a homeowner in Manheim Township called to say that Hamilton was sleeping under the trampoline in his backyard. Now, you might think that at this point it would be an easy arrest, but you'd be wrong. And that's because there's something that we haven't told you. Hamilton isn't a man. He's a 200-pound pig, and apparently, he's quite the runner. Upon arriving at the scene, officers quickly found themselves outmatched. Sure, they had caught the odd cat or dog before, but understandably, this was quite a bit different. So they decided to call in the Lancaster Farm Sanctuary for some backup. Though much more skilled in the art of pig catching, the farm sanctuary too soon realized that Hamilton was quite the handful. He refused to be bribed with food, and when they attempted to move in on him, he ran for it, initiating a foot chase. The pursuit was apparently every bit as dramatic and hilarious as it sounds, with authorities saying that the irony of 3 police officers chasing a pig wasn't lost on them. Eventually, Hamilton was finally captured by the farm sanctuary workers after he ran into the fenced-in area of a pediatric care facility. He was then taken to the workers' farm, where he will reportedly live from now on. While Hamilton's new home seems to have been a bit of an adjustment for him, staff say that he appears to be settling in now. In social media posts, they stated that he was pretty scared when he arrived, but is now eating, drinking, and exploring his new surroundings just like any other pig. He's also been renamed Gregory, though personally, I think Hamilton the Hog was a way better choice. Manheim police thanked Lancaster Farm Sanctuary following the incident, saying in part, quote, "Not all heroes wear capes. Sometimes they wear muck boots." Representatives from the United States Attorney's Office for the Central District of California say that a 35-year-old woman has been sentenced to federal prison time this week after she was convicted in connection with a strange and terrifying incident that took place at a Los Angeles County bank nearly 2 years ago. According to reports, the incident unfolded on September 20th, 2021, when the woman, 35-year-old Tyranny Millett, walked into a Bank of America branch in the city of Torrance. After standing in line for a bit, she went to speak with the bank's manager, demanding that they get another teller to help her because she had been waiting for too long. When the manager informed Millett that there were no other employees available, she reportedly became irate, yelling, quote, "I'm going to blow this bitch up," and running outside. The bank manager immediately called 911, though before help could arrive, Millett returned, throwing a lit Molotov cocktail inside the building, which started a fire in the middle of the floor. Luckily, a customer was able to extinguish the flames before they got out of hand, though by the time police got to the scene, Millett had fled. On her way to her vehicle, she reportedly threatened another customer, throwing a glass bottle at their truck, which caused minor damage. While police were able to identify Millett thanks to the bank's CCTV footage, it would be roughly another 2 months before they were able to capture her. She was finally taken into custody in December of 2021, following another dramatic incident in which the 35-year-old led law enforcement in Georgia on a high-speed chase in a stolen U-Haul van. The chase ended in a crash, which caused Millett to be hospitalized. A search of the vehicle afterwards revealed more materials for making Molotov cocktails, including glass bottles with tissue paper inserted in them, a can of lighter fluid, and a 5-gallon can of gasoline. Miller pleaded guilty to unlawful possession of a firearm and destructive device in March, and this week was sentenced to 24 months in federal prison. Authorities in Indianapolis, Indiana say that a man is facing the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence following a bizarre incident in which he allegedly robbed a woman at gunpoint, then tried to slide into her DMs. According to reports, the incident took place back on May 8th when the victim, Amber Baron, got back to her home on the city's near southeast side after a night of delivering pizzas. It was around 4 in the morning, and Amber went inside quickly to feed her pets, but came back out momentarily to check her mailbox. It was then that she was approached by an unknown man who was riding a bicycle. The man asked Amber if she lived at the house, immediately unnerving her. She replied that she did, but lied, saying that her boyfriend was home and just inside. That's when the man allegedly pulled out a handgun from the pocket of his hoodie and pointed it at her chest. The man explained that he had planned to rob Amber's house and wanted her to let him inside. Knowing there was no way she could let that happen, Amber replied that she didn't have anything of value in there, but that the man could have the roughly $100 in tip money she had just made it work. The man agreed, walking her to her car at gunpoint to retrieve the money. That's when things took a strange turn. Once the man had the money in his possession, he started asking more questions about whether Amber really had a boyfriend. When she reiterated that she did, he asked if he treated her right, then asked if they could be Facebook friends. He instructed her to pull out her phone and navigated her to his profile, where he gave her his name, Damian Boyce. He then hopped on his bicycle and took off. Shaken by the whole ordeal, Amber didn't immediately call police, worried because Boyce knew where she lived and who she was. However, it didn't take long for things to get even stranger. Roughly 3 hours after the robbery, Boyce apparently started sending Amber direct messages over Facebook, saying that he was going to pay her back and asking her if she wanted to hang out. One message reportedly said, quote, "Damn, you was too pretty to rob." Understandably, the whole armed robbery thing didn't really put Amber in the mood for romance, so she contacted police later that day. After a month-long investigation, Boyce was arrested and charged with armed robbery and illegally carrying a handgun. If convicted, he's looking at up to 17 years in prison. The 31-year-old is also apparently facing charges for a separate armed robbery in which he allegedly shot 2 people and hit another in the head with a brick. Authorities in Blue Earth County, Minnesota say that they recently arrested a 19-year-old man on a number of charges following a bizarre case in which he allegedly attacked several people with a bag of candy. According to reports, the incident took place on the afternoon of June 23rd at a restaurant in the city of Mankato. It's unclear how exactly the situation started, though what we do know is that at some point the suspect, later identified as 19-year-old Tristan Stetina, caused quite the scene. During the middle of an outburst, he allegedly began pelting customers and employees inside the restaurant with Skittles, arguably giving a whole new meaning to the slogan, "Taste the Rainbow." Although I suppose in this case it was more like, "Taste the rainbow or else." Anyway, when police arrived at the scene, there was candy all over the floor and an empty bag of Skittles in the restaurant's trash. Stetina had fled by this point, though he wasn't all that hard to find thanks to witnesses' descriptions of his face tattoos. Officers apparently knew who they were talking about almost immediately, as they had reportedly had run-ins with him before. When authorities caught up with the 19-year-old, he wasn't willing to come quietly and allegedly used his leg to try and trip one of the officers, placing him under arrest in order to escape. I guess he was out of fruit-flavored ammo by this point, so he had to improvise. In any case, this was unsuccessful and he was taken into custody. He is now facing charges including misdemeanor assault, disorderly conduct, and resisting police, as well as drug charges from a previous incident. Authorities in Atlanta, Georgia say that an armed robber walked away pretty much empty-handed this week after he attempted to hold up a local business but was snubbed by his would-be victims. According to reports, the incident took place on the afternoon of July 3rd at the Nail First Nail Salon on Piedmont Road. Surveillance footage captured of the bizarre incident shows as the unidentified suspect walks in just after 2:35 p.m., holding what appears to be a handgun concealed in a bag strapped around his shoulder. He proceeds to point the weapon in the direction of several people before starting to yell at everyone inside to give him all of their money. This is the point at which you would normally expect the terrified victims to show some kind of a reaction to what was going on, to comply with the suspect's demands, maybe try and reason with him, or even attempt to run for their lives. However, that's not what happened in this case. No, instead, pretty much everyone just ignored the suspect. And here's the thing. It actually seems to have worked. In the footage, the suspect can be seen repeating his demands for cash several times, as everyone just sort of sits there and looks at him. The business's owner even picks up a phone call during the incident, casually walking away while refusing to acknowledge the robber. While the suspect did snatch a woman's phone when she got up and tried to walk out the door, she doesn't appear all that bothered. Instead, she stands outside for a few moments before coming back inside. By that time, the suspect had apparently realized that his plan was a failure, and he walks out of the nail salon having taken $0 in cash. In interviews after the strange crime, witnesses admitted that they were frightened, though did their best to follow the lead of the salon's owner, who tried to appear relaxed. Police did, however, caution the public afterwards, saying in general it's best to comply with demands in these situations, since you never know what a given suspect is capable of. At the time of this recording, authorities say that they are still seeking to identify the culprit behind this week's incident. Anyone with information is encouraged to reach out to the Atlanta police or Crime Stoppers. Representatives from the FBI say that a Kentucky man is facing charges this week after he was accused of running a disturbing and highly illegal business that sold human remains online. The information comes following a raid on July 11th at the Mount Washington home of 40-year-old James Knott, where authorities say they made a number of chilling finds. Among them were at least 40 human skulls, as well as dozens of other body parts, including spinal cords, femurs, and hip bones. When agents entered the property and encountered Knott, they reportedly asked if anyone else was home. He replied, quote, "Only my dear friends." He was allegedly referring to the body parts, one of which, a skull, was found wrapped in a headscarf in his bed. Knott is now accused of running a disturbing online business through Facebook, where he allegedly sold human remains to buyers all across the country, as recently as last month. Though he used the name of infamous Irish-Scottish serial killer William Burke to conduct business communications, authorities were able to find him in part because he received payments under his real name on PayPal. Perhaps most concerning of all, the FBI says it is still working on finding out exactly where Knott obtained the body parts he was selling. If you're a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week series, you might remember that several weeks ago we brought you the story of two other people, an Arkansas ex-mortuary worker named Candace Chapman Scott and a Pennsylvania man named Jeremy Lee Pauley, who were also involved in similar activities. Following that report, the situation blew up into a multi-state scandal after it was found that Pauley and Scott were part of a larger human remains trafficking network, at the epicenter of which was the former morgue manager of Harvard Medical School, 55-year-old Cedric Lodge. The revelations about Lodge and his alleged accomplices sparked a larger investigation and was reportedly responsible for uncovering James Knott. It's unclear if Knott has yet been directly connected to the Harvard Medical School scandal, though according to reports, he was in contact and did business with Jeremy Pauley prior to his arrest. So far, Knott has only been charged with federal weapons violations due to firearms and bomb-making materials that were illegally in his possession at the time of the raid at his property. However, that is expected to change, as others involved in the scandal are now facing a number of charges related to the interstate shipment, purchase, and sale of human remains. Authorities in the city of Union, South Carolina say that the assistant manager of a local fast food restaurant is facing charges this week following stomach-churning accusations about the location's French fries. It all started on July 9th, when police were called to a Burger King location on Duncan Bypass with reports of a disturbance. Officers arrived to find two women screaming at the restaurant's staff, allegedly swearing at and threatening multiple employees. They attempted to calm the women down, but they were unable to and ended up placing both of them under arrest and charging them with disorderly conduct. It wasn't until a couple of days later, when police received a call from Burger King headquarters, that they apparently realized why the women had been so upset. It turned out that Burger King HQ had reason to believe that the assistant manager of the Duncan Bypass location had been serving French fries from the trash. More specifically, it's alleged that 39-year-old Jamie Christine Major was taking discarded fries and putting them in the fry dump, where freshly cooked fries were put on top. Afterwards, Major reportedly served these fries to customers. On July 17th, Major was arrested and charged with malicious tampering with human food. She has since been fired from Burger King, and if convicted, could reportedly be looking at a maximum sentence of up to 20 years in prison. I don't know about you, but personally, I'm interested to see if this week's incident goes as viral online as the infamous Burger King foot lettuce scandal of 2012. Representatives from the Connecticut State Police say that a truck driver is facing charges this week after he was allegedly responsible for causing nearly a dozen vehicle accidents when the equally gross and strange load he was carrying began to leak out all over a local highway. The incident began sometime between 10:30 and 11 p.m. on July 17th, when the driver, 34-year-old Shaky Stevenson Joseph, was heading north down a portion of Interstate 95 in the city of Bridgeport. At the time, he was working for a contracting and transportation company called H.I. Stone & Son, and was driving a tractor-trailer with a tanker attached. That container was reportedly filled with human feces, which the company had been hired to haul. Yeah, you can see where this is going. According to reports, somewhere between exit 27 and 30, Joseph's truck sprang a leak, causing a trail of human excrement to seep out onto the highway. When it did, the roadway became incredibly slick, turning into what can only be described as the world's most horrifying slip and slide. State troopers were quickly called to the area, though not before a series of accidents were caused by the stomach-churning, slippery conditions. Reports state that at least 10 vehicles were involved in collisions as a result of the poop trail, including a man on a motorcycle who had to be hospitalized for minor injuries after his bike lost traction with the road. Talk about a night. Police themselves weren't immune to the carnage, as 2 cruisers were among the vehicles struck as drivers lost control. Thankfully, there was no one inside either of the vehicles at the time, because from photos it looked like they were hit pretty badly. The whole mess reportedly took some time to clean up and resulted in the partial closure of the interstate for 3 hours. As for the driver, Joseph, he has since been arrested and charged with reckless driving, reckless endangerment, and failing to secure a load. This is reportedly due, at least in part, to the fact that the 34-year-old allegedly knew that his truck was leaking, but did not stop or pull over, instead reportedly exiting the highway and continuing to drive on local roads. He was eventually called by his company, who had been contacted by police. Joseph was reportedly released after posting $25,000 bail. Authorities in Erie County, Ohio say that a bumbling would-be burglar was left pretty embarrassed this week after his plan to rob a bank went sideways, leaving him not only empty-handed, but also comically trapped in front of police. According to reports, it all started at around 2 a.m. on July 26th, when officers from the Huron Police Department received a notification that an alarm had been triggered at the local Vacation Land Federal Credit Union. When they arrived, strange noises immediately caught their attention, which they realized were coming from an access door above the bank's drive-thru. Officers watched for a few seconds as the door opened, revealing a masked man who had obviously broken in. Without checking to see if anyone was there, the man dropped a bag he was carrying to the ground before starting to lower himself from the access door. It was at this point that police announced themselves. Evidently startled that he had been caught, the man fell from the access door right into a large wheeled recycling bin below the door. Realizing that he was now trapped and seemingly resigned to his fate, he could be heard on body camera footage saying, "Aw, f***," before surrendering without any kind of struggle. Things got even more embarrassing for the suspect when, while being placed under arrest, the bin he was in gave out for a second time, causing him to fall towards the ground. After being taken into custody, the man was identified as 27-year-old Tristan Heidi. Heidi reportedly continued to cooperate with police, admitting that he had been trying to rob the bank and saying that he had done it because he was broke. Heidi also reportedly revealed that his robbery plans had been a bust even before police had arrived. At the time he was caught, he had actually been leaving the building empty-handed after failing to secure any cash. Funnily enough, the only thing that he had successfully stolen was the recycling bin that he had fallen into, which he had initially used to climb up to the access door. Heidi is now facing charges of breaking and entering, possession of criminal tools, and safecracking. Authorities in Douglas County, Nevada say that a 26-year-old California man has been arrested in connection with a pair of strange and creepy incidents this week after he was allegedly caught breaking into the homes of two women to touch their feet. According to Douglas County investigators, the two crimes unfolded sometime between July 1st and 3rd, when the suspect, 26-year-old Mark Gonzalez, snuck into resort condos belonging to the two female victims near Lake Tahoe. In both cases, Gonzalez allegedly came in through unlocked screen doors in the middle of the night, positioned himself at the foot of the victim's bed, and began fondling their feet. When the women woke up and confronted him, he fled. Police say that Gonzalez was arrested at his home in Merced County, California on August 1st after undisclosed forensic techniques were used to link him to the crimes. While the 26-year-old is now facing 2 counts of burglary and 2 counts of battery in connection with the July incidents, apparently this is not the first time he has been investigated for similar offenses. Authorities in California say that he had previously committed a series of crimes there too, during which he allegedly stole women's shoes, trespassed, and engaged in self-gratification. Following Gonzalez's arrest this week, Douglas County Sheriff Dan Coverly said that he was pleased that they had been able to identify and locate him, noting that it appeared the 26-year-old's behavior was escalating prior to being caught. An elderly Maine woman showed some serious compassion, understanding, and quite frankly, badass behavior this week after she fought off a violent intruder in her home and then fed him a snack before calling police. It all started at around 2 a.m. on July 26th when 87-year-old Marjorie Perkins awoke to a terrifying situation in her Brunswick home. A teenage boy was standing over her bed, and when he realized she was awake, he said, quote, "I'm going to cut you." Immediately, Marjorie decided that no matter what happened, she was going to put up a fight. She jumped into her shoes, started kicking, and grabbed a chair to defend herself. The tactic worked. Though she wasn't able to deflect all of the suspect's blows, the chair took the brunt of the hits, and eventually the teen stopped. Evidently tired from the attack, he proceeded to walk into the kitchen, where he mentioned that he hadn't eaten for quite some time. Marjorie took out some honey crackers, peanut butter, 2 containers of Ensure, and a couple of tangerines and handed them over to the suspect before calling 911. Though the teen fled the scene before officers arrived, he left behind a good chunk of his belongings in Marjorie's bedroom. It turned out that he had broken in by removing a panel from her in-window air conditioning unit and then squeezing through the gap. A police dog was used to track the suspect, who was arrested a few blocks away. He was later taken to the Long Creek Youth Development Center in South Portland and is now facing charges including burglary, criminal threatening, assault, and consuming liquor as a minor. While the suspect's name has not been released due to his age, Marjorie says that he is a 17-year-old boy who she recognized from the area because he had once mowed her lawn about 10 years ago to make extra money. In an interview following the crime, she said, quote, "He did a darn good job. I hope he gets help." Representatives from the Pennsylvania State Police say that a 20-year-old man could be facing numerous charges this week after he allegedly crashed a car into the second story of a house, a collision which authorities say was deliberate. According to reports, the dramatic crash took place at around 3:15 p.m. on August 6th when the suspect, 20-year-old Evan Miller, was driving in Decatur Township. Police now say that Miller was traveling at between 90 and 100 miles an hour when he deliberately steered into a ditch, launching the Toyota Corolla he was driving into the air and sending it smashing into the second floor of a home on Alpharetta Road. Following the crash, Miller allegedly ran around the scene yelling that he saw demons and also claiming to be one. He was taken into custody when police arrived and placed in an ambulance before being transported to a local hospital. Once there, the 20-year-old reportedly made animal noises and growling sounds at an officer and allegedly kicked a security guard twice. Though thankfully no one else was injured as a result of the crash, both the car, which is said to belong to Miller's grandmother, and the home he smashed into sustained serious damage. Removing the vehicle from the second floor reportedly took about 2 hours, after which emergency crews had to stabilize the building so that it wouldn't collapse. The room that took the brunt of the damage, which appears to have been some kind of home gym, also needed to be tarped to keep out rain from looming storms. At the time of this recording, police say that they do not believe the collision was accidental, though it's unclear exactly where the case stands. Some reports state that authorities are still considering charges against Miller, while others state that he has already been charged with numerous offenses, including aggravated assault, felony criminal mischief with damage to property, recklessly endangering another person, harassment, reckless driving, careless driving, failing to drive at a safe speed, and disregarding a traffic lane. The situation is still developing. Authorities in Coweta County, Georgia say that a local man recently gave new meaning to the term porch pirate after he was accused of quite literally stealing the entire front porch of his neighbor's house. According to reports, the whole thing started earlier this month on August 14th, when police received a report about the bizarre theft. The victim stated that a full 8 by 10 foot porch complete with stairs had been stolen from their property, further explaining that while their home might have looked abandoned, it was not, and that there were no trespassing signs clearly put up all around the property. An investigation soon led police to a local man named Robin Swanger. A multi-day search was launched, during which Swanger apparently returned to the property with the stolen porch and left it there turned upside down. However, he was eventually arrested on August 13th after police received a call about a domestic disturbance between him and his wife. Speaking about the incident after the fact, a representative from the Coweta County Sheriff's Office explained that the stolen porch was made of good quality lumber and was actually valued at around $3,000, saying, quote, "Some people may shrug their shoulders and say it's not a big deal, but you can't just go and take stuff off of someone's property." At the time of this recording, Swanger is reportedly facing a felony theft charge as well as 2 counts of domestic battery. Indiana state troopers apparently wanted to send the message that they aren't messing around when it comes to impaired driving, after they arrested and charged a local man this week who was behind the wheel of a children's toy. According to reports, it all started around 9 p.m. on August 23rd, when a state police trooper spotted the 51-year-old suspect, John McKee, driving a blue Power Wheels Jeep on North 2nd Street in Vincennes Township. Though McKee was apparently pulled over originally because he was driving the toy Jeep on the road with no lights or reflectors in the dark, things escalated when the trooper noticed some signs that the 51-year-old might be intoxicated. He was asked to perform a roadside sobriety test, which he allegedly failed. After being taken to a nearby hospital, it was reportedly determined that McKee was under the influence of both marijuana and methamphetamine, and he was placed under arrest. He is now facing a felony charge of operating a vehicle while intoxicated with a prior conviction. The Power Wheels Jeep, meanwhile, which reportedly has a maximum speed of 5 miles per hour, was picked up by a local towing company.
Representatives from the Vermont State Police say that an accused serial thief is finally in custody this week after he led authorities on a wild 2-week chase, one that involved quite a number of allegedly stolen vehicles. According to reports, it all started on August 24th when 52-year-old Eric Edson allegedly carried out an armed robbery at a retail store in the city of Burlington. He managed to escape from the scene and wasn't spotted again until August 30th, when police apparently found him passed out in a running car, the same one he had reportedly used in the robbery. Police managed to wake Edson up, though before they could do anything, he slammed on the gas and took off, striking 2 officers in the process. Thankfully, it appears both were okay. The chase continued later that night when Edson was spotted on foot in a nearby area. The 52-year-old ran a short distance before hopping on a bicycle, which he then swapped out for a sailboat. After taking the boat onto Lake Champlain, Edson was confronted by the Coast Guard, who were able to run him aground at the base of some cliffs, though once again, he was able to get away. Over the next week, Edson would continue to evade police, leaving behind a trail of additional stolen vehicles that reportedly included a full-size John Deere tractor and a dump truck. Finally, on September 7th, authorities would catch a lucky break when they received a tip from a member of the public who had seen Edson in a stolen kayak on the Lamoille River near the town of Georgia. He was still in the kayak when police arrived, and though he abandoned the boat and tried to swim away, he was arrested on the southern bank of the river close to Georgia Mountain Road. He was subsequently taken to a local hospital to be treated for injuries he sustained during the chase. According to reports, Edson is now facing more than a dozen charges linked to both the armed robbery and the lengthy police pursuit, including assault and robbery with a weapon, grand larceny, eluding law enforcement, unauthorized use of a boat, careless and negligent operation of a vessel, reckless or grossly negligent operation of a vehicle, and simple assault on a protected professional.
Representatives from Nebraska's Lancaster County Sheriff's Office are reminding the public of the dangers of drinking and driving this week after they released body cam footage from a DUI stop earlier this year that was as unbelievably terrifying as it was unbelievably stupid. According to reports, it all started one night back in March when the sheriff's office received a 911 call from a man who said that he needed to report some dangerous driving. He said he was traveling down a section of Highway 77 in Lancaster County and had just had an extremely close call with a truck, which he claimed was traveling in the wrong direction and had nearly run him off the road. Though the man appeared genuinely rattled by what had happened on the phone, what he didn't realize was that the dangerous driving he was reporting was in fact his own. You see, he was the one on the wrong side of the road. He just didn't know it because he was drunk. Thanks to the very accurate coordinates that the man was able to provide about his location, he was quickly spotted by a Lancaster sheriff's deputy who pulled him over. It was only at this point that the driver apparently started to piece together what had actually happened. When asked if he knew why he'd been pulled over, the man replied, quote, "Yeah, because I was on the wrong side of the road." He tried to claim that it was because he had missed an exit. Understandably, this explanation did not cut it, especially when the driver was found to have a blood alcohol content of twice the legal limit. After being arrested, the man admitted that he had essentially called 911 on himself, leading to this ridiculous exchange.
Were you the one that called in?
Yep.
You were?
Yeah, because I thought somebody was on the wrong side of the road, bro.
But it turned out it was you.
Yep, look at dumb.
At the time of this recording, the driver's name has not been released. Representatives from the United States Coast Guard say that a Florida man is facing federal charges this week after he caused numerous problems for them and made threats when they attempted to rescue him from an ill-considered and likely fatal voyage across the Atlantic Ocean in a device that has been likened to a human-sized hamster wheel. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime on August 26th when the Coast Guard was sent to rescue 44-year-old Reza Bellucci, who had been spotted in the water roughly 70 miles off the coast of Tybee Island, Georgia. When officials arrived, they discovered Bellucci inside of a large metal drum that had been equipped with paddles as well as buoys to keep it afloat. The thing operated by Bellucci running on the inside of the drum and rotating it, much like a giant hamster wheel. Authorities quickly learned that the bizarre contraption was not properly registered in any way, though this was really the least of their concerns. The thing just looked like a death trap, and as a result, the Coast Guard informed Bellucci he was conducting a manifestly unsafe voyage, and that they would be cutting the whole thing short. Bellucci, however, apparently had no intention of stopping. He said that he was going to run all the way to London, England, and refused to disembark from the hamster wheel. Things escalated when he allegedly threatened to take his own life with a large knife, and he also claimed that he had a bomb aboard. This ridiculous situation reportedly went on for a whopping 6 days, until finally Bellucci admitted he did not have explosives and agreed to get out of the hamster wheel. He apparently did so at the U.S. Coast Guard base in Miami Beach, Florida. He was then arrested and is now facing federal charges of obstruction of a boarding and violation of a captain of the port order. According to reports, this is far from the first time Bellucci has tried his giant hamster wheel stunt. He apparently did similar things in 2014, 2016, and 2021. Every single one so far has ended with the Coast Guard getting involved. It appears that the 44-year-old doesn't have any plans of stopping either. He says he does this to raise money for numerous charitable causes and organizations, one of which, ironically, is the U.S. Coast Guard. Authorities in Atlantic County, New Jersey say that a man has been charged and is also looking at a hefty fine this week following a series of bizarre incidents in which he allegedly used a drone to drop fluorescent green dye into local pools. According to reports, police were first alerted to the situation on August 13th when they were called by a concerned homeowner in the city of Absecon. The homeowner said that they had seen a drone hovering over their property, one which appeared to drop something into their swimming pool. When they went outside to investigate, the pool had been turned an alarming shade of bright green. It turned out that the color change had come from sea dye, a substance normally used by the military as well as naval rescue services, which is designed to make the water's surface more visible to rescue pilots. Not long after receiving this first report, police began to receive similar complaints all over Atlantic County. A Quality Inn in Galloway Township had apparently gotten it particularly badly, with the manager there stating that the drone had hit her hotel's pool a number of times beginning as far back as June. The manager said that it had happened with such frequency that the pool had been unusable for much of the summer. She estimated that the situation had cost the hotel thousands of dollars between repeated drainings and refillings, extra maintenance, and lost business. While sea dye is meant to be safe for humans and the environment, it's still apparently not something you'd generally want to dump in your pool. Several of those affected say that the dye did lasting damage, particularly in cases where the pools had concrete bottoms. On September 1st, investigators were able to track the drone that was allegedly dropping the dye to a business called Comfort Solutions Heating and Cooling. It was there that they found and arrested the suspect, 45-year-old Patrick Spina. According to reports, Spina is now facing multiple charges of criminal mischief over the drone-related pool dyeing, though he has been released from custody ahead of court proceedings. The FAA has since stated that the 45-year-old is also looking at potential fines of more than $30,000 and the likely revocation of his drone certification. While no motive has yet been provided behind the bizarre string of crimes, police say they believe they were intended to be a prank. Authorities in Newport, Rhode Island say that half a dozen members of a wedding party were recently arrested and are facing charges this week after an incident at a local restaurant spiraled out of control and the group got into an all-out brawl with police. The whole thing started sometime in the early morning hours of September 10th when police were called to the Landing Restaurant, a dockside seafood bar located in the popular Bowen's Wharf area. Authorities were contacted by staff at the restaurant after an altercation with a man who was part of a wedding party who allegedly became violent after being asked to leave. According to the staff members, the incident began when the man, later identified as David Onick, was denied entry to the restaurant. It wasn't stated why this was the case, though it's possible it was due to his apparent level of intoxication. Upon being asked to leave, Onick reportedly refused. He then allegedly shoved one employee and tried to punch another before being restrained. When officers arrived at the scene, they attempted to speak with Onick, who was apparently uncooperative. As police attempted to put him under arrest, his wife, Rachel Onick, allegedly intervened, causing other officers to try and walk her away from the situation. Apparently, Rachel was also uncooperative, leading to her tripping and falling onto the cobblestone road. It was at this point that all hell broke loose. Evidently believing that Rachel had been pushed, members of the wedding party surrounded police, repeatedly ignoring orders to stand back. Multiple people were then witnessed getting into scuffles with officers, fights which quickly escalated. During this time, one wedding party member, later identified as Alexandra Flaherty, allegedly kicked an officer in the groin area, while another, identified as Robert Nash, hit an officer in the face while police were attempting to restrain Flaherty. Things reached a particularly dangerous climax when police say that one of the suspects attempted to grab an officer's gun. The officer responded by throwing a punch, one that reportedly missed the intended target and hit Rachel Onick in the jaw, who was knocked out and fell to the ground. Authorities say she later recovered and was treated for injuries to her jaw, head, and elbow. Unfortunately for Rachel, though, she, her husband, and 4 of their friends are now facing charges over the out-of-control brawl. All 6 of them have now been slapped with varying offenses, including assault of police officers and other officials, simple assault or battery, resisting arrest, obstructing office and the execution of duty, and disorderly conduct. Ironically, it appears that David Onick, the man who allegedly started the whole thing, is facing the least severe penalty, having been hit with a single disorderly conduct charge. Authorities in Macomb County, Michigan say that a Canadian man is in serious trouble this week after he illegally crossed the border in fairly bizarre fashion and then allegedly tried to steal a gun from a local pawn shop. According to reports, the whole thing started recently when Ontario resident 24-year-old Jeremy James Wallace had his guns confiscated due to an unspecified firearms offense. Unable to legally purchase additional weapons, though apparently determined to skirt the ban, it was at this point that he came up with a plan. In the early morning hours of September 6th, Wallace allegedly put on a wetsuit and flippers and swam across the St. Clair River from the village of Sombra, Ontario, into Michigan. Once there, he traveled roughly 12 miles to the Metro Pawn and Gun store in the village of New Haven, where he posed as a customer. After having employees at the pawn shop bring him out a .22 caliber handgun to look at, Wallace apparently inquired about a second firearm. When the employee who was speaking with him went to get the weapon, Wallace allegedly grabbed the first gun off the counter along with 2 empty magazines and fled. Unfortunately for Wallace, he didn't make it very far before police arrived at the scene. They reportedly witnessed him running around the back of the pawn shop and into a wooded area where he was tracked down and arrested. Upon being taken into custody, Wallace reportedly shared the details of his scheme. He told them about the wetsuit, the flippers, and the flotation device he'd used to cross the river, and was also allegedly in possession of a pistol crossbow, some ammunition, and a hammer. He said he'd brought the additional tools in case the pawn shop was closed when he got there and he needed to break in. Authorities say that Wallace is now facing multiple charges, including improper entry by an alien, being an alien in possession of a firearm and ammunition, and possession of a stolen firearm. Authorities in Warren County, New Jersey say that a local man is looking at serious prison time this week after he recently crashed his vehicle into a home and a police station, incidents which investigators say were deliberate. According to reports, the whole thing took place sometime on September 20th when the suspect, 34-year-old John Hargreaves, got behind the wheel of his gold Toyota SUV. After driving the vehicle to Liberty Township, he allegedly crashed the SUV through the garage door of a home there before traveling to the nearest police station in neighboring Independence Township. Upon arriving, Hargreaves smashed the SUV into the station, narrowly missing at least one officer and only coming to a stop once he had barreled into the department's squad room. Perhaps most bizarre of all, though, is that authorities say Hargreaves was blaring the Guns N' Roses song "Welcome to the Jungle" over his vehicle's stereo during the crash. When he got out of the SUV immediately afterwards, he also appeared to be celebrating to the music. While the motive behind the first crash at the house was apparently to harass a person that Hargreaves knew there, the 34-year-old's reasoning for smashing into the police station remains unclear. Regardless, though, he is now facing a slew of charges connected to both incidents. Charges which include burglary, criminal mischief, unlawful possession of a weapon, harassment, causing widespread injury or damage, and terrorism. A New York woman says that she hopes she and her family are finally at the end of an equally frustrating and terrifying ordeal this week, after a man who had allegedly been stalking and threatening her for 4 years was arrested and charged. According to reports, the trouble started for 42-year-old Cassie Wheelush back in November of 2019, when she was running her small business Revolution Cafe in her hometown of Schuylerville. At that time, she had a number of regulars, one of whom was retired merchant marine 65-year-old Michael Arnold. At first, Arnold seemed like any other customer. However, that changed one day when he sent her a disturbing email. It contained nearly 24 photos of him tied up with naked women, with a message saying that Cassie should, quote, open her mind. Cassie says that she replied respectfully over Facebook, saying she took exception to being sent the graphic photos, then blocked Arnold. Little did she know, he was just getting started. After Cassie's rejection, Arnold ramped up his disturbing behavior in terrifying ways, posting photos of her car and home to a community Facebook page, sitting outside her residence at the end of her driveway, and mailing photos of her and her family members to them with check marks next to their faces. The most bizarre behavior by far, though, was when Arnold, who was a licensed pilot, would fly over Cassie's home in his single-engine Cessna airplane. He reportedly did this as low as possible so as to make his presence known and to rattle the windows and roof of the house. On at least one occasion, Arnold reportedly threw tomatoes out of the plane at the residence as he was flying over. Though authorities eventually issued Cassie a restraining order against Arnold and he was arrested at least once, the court order apparently had one glaring oversight. It did not bar Arnold from flying over her home. As Arnold continued his behavior, Cassie desperately tried to appeal to the New York State Police and the FAA to do something. However, she claims her complaints fell on deaf ears. Things got even worse for Cassie when her husband Dave was diagnosed with colon cancer. As he lay dying in his bed at home, Arnold continued to harass and stalk the family, flying over as many as 4 to 5 times a week, all while the police allegedly did nothing. Sadly, Dave passed away in May of this year. After he did, Arnold reportedly left nasty and harassing messages on his obituary page. It wasn't until Arnold sent a threatening online message to Cassie's young daughter that police apparently finally started paying attention. He was recently arrested at an airfield just across the state line in Bennington, Vermont, after flying over Cassie's house, then again on October 6th in connection with the threatening message. At the time of this recording, Arnold is now facing 9 charges, at least one of which is for felony first-degree criminal contempt. Authorities in Muncie, Indiana say that a local professional wrestling personality is facing charges this week after he allegedly beat down a fan in the parking lot after a show this past summer who he claims was heckling him. According to reports, the whole thing unfolded on August 12th when the unidentified victim attended an Indiana powerhouse wrestling show at the Delaware County Fairgrounds. The man, who reportedly has autism, went to the show accompanied by his caretaker. During the show, witnesses say that the victim became, quote, loud and boisterous. Personally, I thought this was the whole point of going to a wrestling show, but it apparently caused people around him to get angry. At any rate, he and his caretaker were eventually moved by staff, initially making it seem like any tension had been diffused. However, as the victim was leaving the venue, he was confronted by one of the performers, 42-year-old Michael Kine, also known by his wrestling alias, Creepy the Clown. Authorities now allege that Kine elbowed the victim in the back of the head before screaming, quote, "You want to call someone a bitch? Call me a bitch." The man reportedly responded by smashing Kine in the face with a can of Coke. From here, things escalated significantly, with Kine proceeding to attack the victim. His caretaker apparently tried to intervene, but was blocked by a crowd of fans who gathered around to watch. One of them reportedly told the caretaker, quote, "Let them finish the fight." Another witness later recalled seeing Kine hovering over the victim as he lay on the ground, yelling, quote, "Don't call my son a f***ing retard." When the brawl was finally over, the victim was reportedly left with a broken nose and several lacerations to the face. Kine was fired after the incident, though when interviewed by investigators apparently claimed he had no involvement in the fight. This week, he was charged with felony battery of an endangered adult. If convicted, he could be looking at between 1 and 6 years in prison.
The residents of a Sacramento, California neighborhood were apparently treated to quite the bizarre scene this week, after they heard the jarring sounds of multiple police sirens, only to find that authorities were chasing a single man on a forklift. According to reports, the whole thing began just before midnight on October 29th, when officers from the Sacramento Police Department spotted a man driving the allegedly stolen forklift down the road near the 2700 block of Fair Oaks Boulevard. Police attempted to conduct a traffic stop, however, the suspect, later identified as 47-year-old Wayne Mathern, allegedly refused to pull over. Not long after, Mathern reportedly turned into the city's River Park neighborhood, where confused residents quickly noticed the commotion. The pursuit was hard to miss, especially since the average speed was apparently only about 10 miles an hour. From the perspective of residents, though, it seems to have looked more like the world's worst parade rather than an actual car chase. Apparently, this whole thing went on for 35 minutes until Mathern took down a fence at a local park and ended up disabling the forklift on a nearby bike trail. He was arrested and is now facing charges including evading, resisting arrest, and vandalism. According to reports, Mathern was already facing charges prior to this week's incident. He was recently charged with misdemeanor battery on a peace officer and misdemeanor giving false information, though failed to appear in court on October 16th. At the time of this recording, it's still not clear where the 47-year-old allegedly stole the forklift from.
In other forklift-related news, representatives from Ohio's Akron Police Department say that a suspected car thief recently got quite the surprise when he was allegedly in the middle of trying to steal a vehicle and suddenly found himself 20 feet in the air with nowhere to go, thanks to the actions of a quick-thinking forklift operator. According to reports, the whole thing started on the afternoon of October 17th, when employees at Arlington Auto Wrecking spotted a man trying to steal a gray SUV from the business's salvage yard. Almost immediately, they recognized the suspect, later identified as 26-year-old Alexander Funk. Apparently, Funk had tried to steal from the salvage yard twice before, though both times had managed to get away. Unfortunately for the 26-year-old, his luck was about to run out. A quick-thinking member of the staff jumped behind the wheel of one of the company's loaders and headed directly for the gray SUV. He then lifted the vehicle up into the air, with Funk still inside. Though Funk apparently attempted to shake the SUV loose of the loader's grip, it was no use. He was trapped. In the meantime, fellow employees called 911. In audio of the call, they could reportedly be heard explaining, quote, "So he's still in the car about 20 feet in the air in the loader," prompting the dispatcher to reply, quote, "Wonderful. That is the greatest thing I've ever heard. We will get somebody out to you." It appears that Akron police were just as amused by the situation when they arrived at the scene. Body cam footage shows them chatting with employees at the salvage yard as the SUV was lowered to the ground. As you might expect, Funk was not in a laughing mood when he was brought down and placed in handcuffs. After refusing to give police his name, he appeared incredulous at the news that he was being arrested, claiming that he was only in the SUV because he was trying to run from someone. Understandably, authorities did not buy this explanation, and he is now facing charges including criminal trespassing and possessing criminal tools. Well, folks, I know it's been a lot of sleepless nights, but I'm happy to report that after 6 months, police have finally done it. They got the bastards that stole those dimes. What's that? You have no idea what I'm talking about? I was the only person who was following this story? Also, I'm screaming and I need to calm down because I'm scaring everyone? Well, Okay, that last part is probably true, but I still think this story about dimes is interesting, so we're going to talk about it. Now, if you're a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week series, you might remember that all the way back in spring of this year, we brought you quite the bizarre story out of Philadelphia. It was here, on the morning of April 13th, that employees of the Walmart Supercenter on Byberry Road arrived to find hundreds and hundreds of dimes scattered across the parking lot and out into the roadway. As it turned out, those dimes had come from a tractor trailer which had been left in the Walmart parking lot overnight. They were part of a shipment from the Philadelphia Mint, which was supposed to send $750,000 worth of the coins down to Miami. The driver had left the trailer there while he got some sleep before the journey, though unfortunately, the entire thing was only secured with a single padlock. If you'll recall, at the time of our last recording, police still hadn't determined exactly how many dimes were stolen from the trailer, nor had any suspects been arrested. Well, we're happy to report that's all now changed. Thanks to an unsealed indictment this week, we now know that 4 men have been arrested and charged in connection with the April dime theft. They have been identified as 25-year-old Rakeem Savage, 31-year-old Ronald Bird, 30-year-old Hanif Palmer, and 32-year-old Malik Palmer. It's also now alleged that the men stole $234,500 worth of dimes, a haul that would have weighed more than a ton. If you're asking yourself how you could even use that much change, apparently, this is something that the suspects struggled with as well, and ultimately never figured out. They apparently took some of the dimes to Coinstar machines in neighboring Maryland, and others to banks in suburban Philadelphia. Unfortunately, though, they were only able to launder about $5,200 worth of the cash, though. It appears that the rest of it currently remains unaccounted for. The dimes were far from the only theft the 4 men were allegedly involved with, though. According to police, the crime was part of a larger racket the suspects were running, one in which they robbed several tractor trailers that were parked overnight, often with the drivers still inside. They reportedly took everything from crab legs and frozen shrimp to beer in full-size refrigerators. In one incident, it's alleged that Savage stole 60 cases of Jose Cuervo tequila off the back of a truck. I'm not sure how he sold it, because that stuff is disgusting, but in general, the rest of the stolen merchandise was allegedly moved online. At the time of this recording, all 4 men are facing charges including conspiracy, robbery, and theft of government money. That last charge is a doozy. Generally speaking, you don't want to f*** around with the federal government. Apparently, if convicted, the suspects could be looking at decades in prison. Authorities in Anaheim, California say that a man is facing charges this week following a bizarre incident in which he stripped off his clothes inside of a beloved Disneyland attraction and proceeded to run around naked. The incident began at around 1:30 on the afternoon of November 26th when Anaheim police were called by Disneyland staff members. They explained that a guest at the park, identified only as a 26-year-old man, was wreaking havoc on the It's a Small World ride. While it's unclear how the whole thing actually started, riders had first seen the man as he stripped down to his boxers and climbed into one of the water areas of the attraction. He later got out and appeared to be playing with the animatronics before completely removing his clothing altogether and continuing to walk around. At one point, he was observed standing nude near the entrance to the ride's main tunnel in broad daylight. The man's antics briefly forced Disney staff to stop the ride, though thankfully he was eventually taken into custody by police without anyone being injured. The 26-year-old, whose name has not been released, has now been charged with indecent exposure and for being under the influence of a controlled substance. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.